Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. I was just talking with Jason before the broadcast about Psychology 101, freshman year, and conditioned response. And maybe I'll tell that story someday. You know, I'm delighted to be broadcasting with your newest instructor. Her name is Dr. Amber Abernathy. She graduated with a Ph.D. in experimental psychology from Oklahoma State University. She's currently an associate professor of psychology at Missouri State University and the Mary Charlotte Bayless Sheely Chair in Conscientious Psychology. She has interests in conscientiousness, personality, changing personality traits, psychophysiology, leadership, mindfulness, meditation, self-regulation, social status, psychobiology of the stress response, the differences in the sexes, stress and health, dominance, social hierarchies, Machiavellianism, empathy, and autism. And unlike many of your instructors, actually most of your instructors, Dr. Abernathy is able to hold down a job. Welcome, Dr. Abernathy.
It's all because of conscientiousness. That's the only reason.
And I was telling Jason that I'm really looking forward to this. Oh, class, we won't be taking calls today, but I'm really looking forward to this because maybe we'll get a slight insight as to why our adult children who have never been married, I mean, Mrs. Finelli and my children who have never been married, have not found that ideal spouse yet. You know, they're in, one's, mid-30s, another one's mid-30s, another one is about 30. So maybe we can find out a little bit about that. So I'm so glad you're here with us. And, you and I met years ago at an event that Dr. Sheely had. And, we sat across from each other, at a dinner table, and it was a wonderful experience. And I'm so glad that we've had a chance to, teach a broadcast class together. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about conscientiousness. It's something that Dr. Norm Sheely talks about very often. And so why don't we start with your background, if that's okay with you, Dr. Abernathy?
That works great for me. I came from Oklahoma State University and studied experimental psychology. So I tell people I am not clinical. I don't come to help you. I just come to study you and find out the greater understanding of people, and then someone else can help you clinically. So that's not my job. But my background actually in research was looking at dominance hierarchies and status and what made people on top. And stress was a big part of that, how stress plays a role in that. The lab I came from did a lot with physiological measures. So we do skin conductance. We do spit samples for things like oxytocin and testosterone and cortisol. And so that's kind of where I came from. But then I started noticing that personality played a role in this top position. It's kind of a no-duh, but, when you're studying research, you kind of get on one path and forget to look at the greater picture. So it happened to be that a couple times we threw some personality questionnaires in there and found some things, and so that changed my trajectory a little bit. So I still look at dominance hierarchies and social status and stress, but now I really kind of focus a little bit more on how personality plays a role in that.
And so are we talking about how people arrive at the top? I'm talking about like a Bill Gates, a Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Yes and no. So I studied it a couple of different ways. The reason I got into that personal story here is I worked with a group of women, and they were really backstabbing on each other. So they were nice one day, pro-social, helping, friendly, and then the next moment they would kind of cut someone down. And they still stayed at the top position doing that. And I kept saying, why are they at the top position? How are people still following them when they also cut people down? So I decided to go back to college and get my degree and got it in psychology and kept going. And this was such an interesting thing for me to study. So I found what's called perceived popularity. And these are individuals that use pro-social, helping type behaviors, as well as coercive, so making or forcing others to go along with it. So I was looking more on kind of this personal basis. I did some research at high school looking at, this happens at high school. I did look in the workplace, this happens at the workplace. But then I elaborated on that, and you do see this in CEOs and business people. So some of my research then started looking at the empathy component. So do you feel for that person? And a lot of your CEOs and business people might not have the highest level of empathy because they can't be empathetic for everyone. They need to make those tough decisions. Sometimes they have to force you to go along with it. So yes, I am seeing that same kind of behavior in CEOs, head of companies, business people, but even at a much lower level, just in your day-to-day groups, in your friend groups, sometimes this is referred to as the mean girl effect, but it's not just with girls. But you do see this combination of pro-social strategies and coercive strategies. So I'm going to help you out. I'm going to make you go along with this. And, the big thing is knowing when to use those strategies.
No, it's interesting that you said that. I remember, I'll put an exclamation point on what you just said. I remember being in an elevator at the county building in Springfield, Missouri. I had to do some paperwork to have an expo. And I got in this elevator, and there were some women in there, and they kind of looked at me. They were already in the elevator, and they looked at me, they looked at each other, and then they continued to beat up, their coworkers, verbally to each other. I mean, they're willing to to talk mean about them, and did you know what Sally did? And boy, it's terrible, and what Bill did, etc. So that's exactly what you were talking about. And yet, they put a smile on it and get out of the elevator and everything seemed to be okay. But they were kind of mean-spirited in this jousting with people that weren't present. The people that they were picking on. Like, did you see the kind of donuts she got? How dare her get donuts like that? I mean, little things, I guess, are big to little people, right?
Right. That's absolutely what they're doing. And what they're doing is keeping their status. I am better than that person. So when that person's not around, let me show my authority, let me show my leadership, and let me cut them down. If I can lower them to some degree, then it just keeps me in the higher position. And then, like I said, they also use that pro-social. So they also come in and say, oh, can you help me out with this? I'm friendly. I'm going to help you. I'm going to do things for you. And so people really get confused by this type of person. It's like, are they helpful? Are they harmful? I see them as nice. I see them as mean. And that's how they're keeping that position. Let me cut you down when it's beneficial. Let me help you when it's beneficial.
Very interesting. So the rest of that story was I got off the elevator and I went up to the counter and they wanted me to fill out some forms. Actually, the county demanded that I fill out these forms for an expo. I said, sure. And so the lady just pushes the forms across the counter and says, fill these out. Sit over there. They had a little table I could sit at. And I looked at them and I said, I'm not sure I can do this right. And I want to make sure I follow this procedure correctly. So would you come over there and sit with me and we can do this together? She was not expecting that I was going to tie her up and that I read slowly. And, it was a great jousting that we went through, with smiles on our faces. And I just wasn't going to let her push me around. So that's kind of how I responded. Any comments about that, Dr. Abernathy?
I think that's a great way to respond because it doesn't let them continue to get the upper hand. I think my biggest issue with people that kind of, again, this is shown to work. I did a study looking actually at preschoolers' behaviors. Now, they're not as kind of backstabbing. Theirs is more physical aggression, but I've seen it in all age groups. It tends to work. But my biggest issue that I have with it is that people don't stand up to them. And that's actually why I started studying this, is it wasn't so much that this one girl did this, that one cashier or, person at the courthouse did it. It was the fact that why does no one else call them out on that? So I think by calling someone out, it doesn't elevate their position. It shows that, no, we're equal, or maybe even my mentality is higher than yours in that case. And so I think that's the best thing to do. I think you handled that right. And maybe made them think a little bit about their behavior.
Dr. Abernathy, I've been audited many, many times at the state level and at the federal level. Tax return kinds of audits, sales tax returns, federal income tax returns, etc. And we prepare our own tax returns. We don't use a preparation service. So we know the rules because we've read the rules. And so when we get audited, it's like I'm being told exactly how I'm going to behave. You are going to do this. And what I do is, they say, all right, prove you have this, this is a legitimate deduction. And I have, boxes of receipts and things. And what I do is I tell them I have it. I have the proof. I've got the notes on the side of the tax form, the tax documentation. I know exactly why I took what deductions, and I have the receipts to prove it. It just takes me a long time to find them. They're in this box, and I'm going to look through them because you need that to complete your audit. So, just give me a few minutes and I'll do my best to find it. And it takes me forever, and they hate it. So is that another example of what you've been talking about? Not standing up to them?
Yes, it can be, definitely. What you're doing is kind of keeping the control at least equal, if not pulling it back to yourself. So when I study leadership, so not just these hierarchies, but leadership, part of that is simply exerting your control as well. And I don't necessarily mean in a bad way. It doesn't mean that we have to, be bullies. Of course, I'm not going that direction. But simply the fact of I have some level of control in my life, and I'm not going to allow you to take charge. And so just simply saying, this is how I'm going to do it as well. I understand your rules. I understand what you're looking for, but I need this.
There's several definitions of management. I don't know if this is taught anymore, but one of the definitions from the School of Management, I attended the School of Management back in the 70s at a different university. But I was taught that management is getting people to do things. And then I was taught that actually there's a little better definition of that, and I'm talking about in business, in a business setting, or in a military setting. Another definition is getting people to do what you want them to do. Another definition is even better than that, getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. Now, my definition is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it because they think it's their idea. I'd love to hear your comments on that when we come back after this short commercial break. Dr. Amber Abernathy is with us. So back in the 70s, I learned that there's two styles of management. One is Theory X and the other is Theory Y. Theory X is your employees hate being at work. They don't want to be there. And the only reason they're there is because they need the money, and the only reason that they perform at their function or their job is because they've been beaten by the boss. So the boss's job is to beat the employees. That's Theory X. Theory Y is the opposite. Your employees want to be at that job site. They want to love what they're doing. They want to be contributors. They want to do an excellent job. And all you have to do as a manager is encourage them and provide them the tools, the opportunity, and lead the way. And so that's where my definition of management, which is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it because they think it's their idea, came from. Your comments, please?
I think that almost always the best type of management is where you get them to do it because they are intrinsically motivated. It's not for the paycheck. It's because they want to do it. It's because they're really involved. If they're doing something only based on some extrinsic reward to get done with the end of the day to get that paycheck, then you're not going to have happy people working for you. And if management only forces ideas on people, then you're not going to have a productive work area. The only thing that I can say is the but, maybe there's always a but in research, but the only thing I can say is a but, is there are times when for the good of the company, the manager has to say, this is it, there's no other way. We see this in parenting as well. For the most part, the best parents are the ones that reason and explain to the child and are, supportive. But there are times, like when safety is an issue, if it's a dangerous area, then you simply say, we're doing it this way. You can't go outside. I'm not going to explain why, you just can't. Right now. And you see this sometimes in businesses as well, especially when we were talking about kind of levels of management. A lot of times those upper managers have to make decisions and not care if the person's intrinsically motivated or not, or, not care if this is going to make all employees happy. It's got to keep the business running. So I would say most often in most managing type positions, trying to get your coworkers, your, employees on board and understanding and thinking that it's their idea and they're sharing in the wealth is going to be the best idea. But there are times when that kind of direct, this is how it's going to be, comes in. And that's where in my research I've studied the trait of Machiavellianism. And you actually see that a lot. It's often called the successful CEO has that Machiavellianism. And that is basically where the ends justify the means. And they're only thinking about that outcome end goal.
I remember a point in our parenting lives when I had a chat with our daughter. And she said, but Mindy's allowed to stay out, till midnight. She was a young child. And, but Mindy's allowed to do that. Why can't I do that? And I said, well, when you were born, I did not get an owner's manual with you. I did not get an instruction book with you. I'm figuring this out as we go. And by the way, I am not Mindy's parent. Mindy has her own parents. So her parents are doing what they think is best, and I'm doing what I think is best. And so that has happened to me, and I guess that happens a lot in the military when, the squad goes out on a mission, and just before the mission, it's a dangerous mission, and the sergeant or the lieutenant says, look, this is pretty dangerous, and some of you aren't going to come back. And the guys say, look, I don't want to go. And they go, that's too bad. You're going. So it does happen, yes. Would you like to talk about how you started working for Dr. Norm Shealy?
Yeah, it actually transitions from that dominance hierarchy into conscientiousness and meeting Norm. So I graduated in 2015 from Oklahoma State University and was on the job market. They tell you when you get a Ph.D., like less than 1% of the population has a Ph.D. They don't tell you then the jobs are like 0.5%. It's a hard job market there. But I really got just blessed. What I did was I did some job searches, and there was one here at Missouri State University, and it was for a teaching position, experimental psychology, but then the research was to emphasize on conscientiousness. And what happened was Dr. Shealy, which I'm sure your listeners are familiar with.
Dr. Abernathy, hold that thought. We're going to another break, and we'll be right back. And then please continue with that thought. That's just a quick update. Tomorrow, hour number 1, I'll be talking about, it'll be just me, I'll be talking about tips from my unorganized, unfinished, and not for sale book, specifically why riding lawnmowers break down. Not only the mower, but the engine. So both the engine and the mower, why they break down. And also we'll be talking about why cars overheat and why mechanics can't seem to find the cause. I'll tell you what the cause is and what you can do about it and what I do about it. Hour number 2, Bert Bertona, CEO, is going to be explaining why the cryptocurrency market collapsed yesterday. So that's tomorrow. Dr. Amber Abernathy is with us. And you were telling us about how you started working with Dr. Norm Shealy. Please continue.
Yes, I was looking at some different job opportunities that were out there, and I came across this one that said that they wanted some research in the personality trait of conscientiousness. Well, it just so happened that two of my recent research findings right at that time was actually on effortful control. And effortful control is a subcomponent of conscientiousness. So I was like, look, I've been doing this. I've actually been researching conscientiousness without at the time knowing exactly what I was looking at, but I was finding that. So that social hierarchy, that dominant individual, it wasn't just that they were using those pro-social and coercive strategies. It was that they had conscientiousness or effortful control, and they knew when to use them. So I decided to apply for the job, and I came along and met Dr. Norm Shealy. And what had happened is Dr. Shealy had seen over and over and over again, he saw that the people that were healthier, that did well, that, didn't get as sick or got over their sickness had this personality trait. So he wanted research done on it. And I was like, look, I've been doing this. And so I did some interviews here at the college and met him. He is a fascinating person, a genius. He has now been kind of the emphasis on my work, and kind of I've grown from there and doing other things outside even of conscientiousness. But I met him through this job search, and like I said, it's been many years now that he has been kind of a mentor to me in research and help and understanding where we're going in life.
Yeah, and isn't it wonderful having a friend such as Dr. Norm Shealy? Now, I think you and I are extremely blessed. And class, I think you're going to find out a little bit about Dr. Norman Shealy as well today during this class with Dr. Amber Abernathy. Can you tell us about your relationship with Dr. Norm Shealy? How does it work?
So it is a great relationship because it's kind of twofold. He lets me run research with whatever I am interested in with my own ideas. So he is not the over-commanding manager that is standing there telling me what I should and shouldn't do. But at the same time, we will have research meetings. I'll discuss things that I've done. He'll tell me ideas along the way. And then he will also tell me ideas that he is looking at, and then I'll help him run that. So some examples of that, I was looking at the concept of self-regulation. It's, again, kind of a subcomponent of this conscientiousness, and can we regulate our emotions? And I said, I think if we can increase that, if we can change self-regulation, we can increase conscientiousness. But I said, how do we change self-regulation? Like, how do I fix that? And he said, if you can teach people to change their body temperature, then you can actually teach them to self-regulate. That's a small component of self-regulation. And so I said, all right, how do we do that even? And so he said, finger thermometers, and you can have them walk through this visualization of warmth. And great idea. I took it and ran with it. We actually ran it this last semester. We're looking for more participants, but we had about 30 last semester. And that's what we were looking at, is can they change their body temperature? And then overall, does that change self-regulation and conscientiousness? And so that was a great just meeting and discussion with that. Then he came to me a few times and said, I'm really working on pulse electromagnetic frequencies. And I said, I've got to Google this. And so we've worked together, him explaining what he's doing. And so we started running research on that. I started gathering participants from him, for him. And we've done it on several different things. He's had oils that he's come along with, and let's study this oil. And because my background is in experimental research, I've got the idea for design, and do we have a control group, and what can we do? And then I can do kind of a wide variety of people. He reaches a lot of people through radio broadcast and his clients, But the people that I reach are more college-based, so we can get a great sample and look at what he's interested in and what I'm interested in, and then combine them. So like I said, he's been a great mentor. Have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? He sends me articles on things. And then in the same aspect, I can write him back and say, hey, I thought about this. And so we really work together that way. So hands-on, hands-off. He is wonderful at being a mentor, but letting me make my own decisions along the way.
It sounds to me like Theory Y, providing you with the opportunities, the tools, some guidance, and letting you run with the tasks, and then letting you figure out tasks that you're interested in, blending them all together, which makes for a great reason to enjoy your profession. And it sounds like you really do enjoy your profession, because he is a Theory Y manager. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. He's so passionate in everything he does. Everything that he does is strictly based on wanting to help people and wanting to understand. And so he just makes it where you want to do the same. Meeting with him and seeing his excitement on something or seeing his new idea or direction makes me go, let me think about that. Let me look into that. And I have always enjoyed my job. I've always enjoyed the research. So when he, adds new ideas and new insight, and again, yes, lets me make my own ideas out of that, then that intrinsic motivation just grows. And so I think both of us are enjoying what we're doing, and, I feed off of his excitement. So you're right. As a manager, he is wonderful at making me come up with my ideas and making me become motivated on my own. And yes, I enjoy everything that we do.
It's quite fascinating. And here at my, function, if you will, at Genesis Communications Network as a broadcaster, the owner of the network is very much the same, with one slight difference. He lets me do whatever I want to do completely. But he knows that there's certain things that I won't do. I am not going to get the network in trouble. He knows that I'm not going to do that. So he lets me do whatever I want, literally. And whenever I call him, which is, just a couple times a year over the last almost a decade, he just says, I don't get any complaints about you. And I think that what that means is, or that translates into just keep doing what you're doing. You're not causing any problems. We haven't been sued. Those kinds of things, and the FCC hasn't come down on us. So, he lets me alone. And I have a feeling that Dr. Shealy is so pleased with your work that he lets you run off with ideas and concepts and tasks that you want to learn more about and study and, research. So that's my impression on, your relationship with Dr. Shealy. You mentioned, controlling the body's temperature. Can you share with us what you've learned about can we control our temperature?
Yes, we can. We can raise it a degree or two after some practice. Part of the easiest way to do that is through the visualization, like picture the sun beaming down on your hand. We actually play a little recording of Dr. Shealy's voice saying that for them. And so it's kind of the visualization. It's thinking about your hand actually warming up. We've noticed that it takes them a few times to kind of get involved and really concentrate on that. But over time, they can learn to raise their body temperature a couple of degrees. And then by default, you can actually do it the opposite way and lower it just slightly as well. And so what it is, there's been some great research looking at the concept of self-regulation. And the idea is that it's like a muscle. And so the more we do it, the stronger it gets. But it can also wear out if you're on a diet and you're trying to regulate, what you're eating, and then you also have to watch what you say because you're at a faculty meeting or whatever you might, on the radio, whatever you're doing, then sometimes you just simply wear out and you don't have any control and you break the diet or you do whatever. So the idea is if we can strengthen self-regulation over time, then you can be better at all of those things. And so simply by changing your body temperature, learning to regulate your body temperature, it actually strengthens all those other areas of your life. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually true, because what's happening is you're learning control. You're learning to control one aspect of your body, which then strengthens all. And so we saw that we had this class. It was a physiology class that a coworker of mine does, and we thought, what better way than teaching physiology by having them use their own body's physiology. And so we had finger thermometers, and at the end of every class period, that's what they would do, is put the finger thermometer on, hear it, and record if they'd raised it or not. And then, like I said, we haven't got all that data, and we'd like more participants. Always like more people. But we're looking to see if that did change their personality trait over the course of the semester as well.
Are you saying that, well, let me ask it this way. Does conscientiousness somewhat equal control?
Yes. So it has been related to control, self-control, effort for control. Yes, big part of conscientiousness is having control over your emotions, your body, your language, and even to some degree your environment. Another big part of conscientiousness is order. And so conscientiousness is very highly related to levels of control.
When I was at the university back in the 70s, I had a financial instructor, and he taught the class about a concept. It has to do with investing and how to invest your Federal Reserve notes, if you will. And he called it mini-max regret, M-I-N-I, max, M-A-X, regret. And what mini-max regret is going through you can apply this to life as well. Going through life, and so at that moment, what would your maximum regret be? So the way I taught this in my classes is, so visualize driving down the interstate, and you're in the slow lane with your car or truck, and flying up on the left-hand lane, the fast lane, if you will, is a truck, and he's overtaking you. And as he does, you notice that he has a ladder, an extension ladder, in the back bed of his pickup truck. And then he pulls in front of you. So now he's in front of you. You're both doing 65 or so. And that ladder is, you see, it's not secured. So what would your maximum regret be at that moment? And that would be that ladder flying out of the truck, caught by a gust of wind by a passing semi, and flying through your windshield. So what do you do to minimize that maximum regret? You back off. Is that what conscientious people do? Dr. Abernathy, I mentioned mini-max regret, something I learned at the university in the early 70s. And that would be minimizing that maximum regret of, in the example that I gave, of that ladder going through your windshield, by somebody pulling in front of you with unsecured load, if you will, in the back of their pickup truck. Is that an example of conscientiousness?
Yes, it is. What is happening is conscientious people have perseverance and industriousness. So they're going to work hard, they're going to keep working, and they're planners. So they're going to take into consideration what's going on in the scenario. How do I get that they follow through? How do I get what I want? What can I fix in that situation? How can I make it through to what I want to do? And they're going to work hard to do it. The only thing that maybe conscientious people don't necessarily do as much is they're planners, and they want control, and they might not always see the negative thing ahead. So the only study that I've ever seen that says high conscientiousness can be a bad thing, the only study, is that people that were unemployed for a long period of time that had high conscientiousness had higher depression rates. So when you're driving along and you think you've planned for everything, and you've made all the plans on the road, and you've checked your car and the tires, and you're driving safe, and then that ladder comes out of nowhere, that can be very hard for high conscientious people because they've planned and they're followed through. Now, if they have enough time to see that problem, then they'll do everything they can to overcome it. And I think that's definitely a part of conscientiousness and grit, just to kind of keep going with that, resiliency, all of those components. But again, the only issue would be if they don't see, if it comes out of nowhere, that can be somewhat hard for conscientious people because they think they've done everything to kind of keep going and follow through.
There's a guy who is well known in the electric car business. I won't mention his name. But, you know, sometimes I look at what happens and I think that, gosh, I don't think he's fully thought this through. For example, he touts how electric cars are wonderful, but what he doesn't consider is that we don't have the grid and the power generation to convert all of these gasoline and diesel engines to electric cars and trucks. So, and then this guy is known for bouts of depression. He really is. And then he'll go off and say things about cryptocurrencies and he'll cause a mini crash, a flash crash, because, you know, he'll talk about how his company will or won't accept them or will change his mind. And he's well followed. And I think that that's a great example, of what you're saying, but I won't mention his name. Does that sound like, the depression that you're talking about and not realizing all of the consequences of one's actions?
It definitely could be. I mean, I think there's a lot of variables at play, but I think that definitely can be part of it. Is you think you've planned and you have this idea and you're following through and you're doing, you know, you're working, you think you have control, but maybe not taking into consideration all of these outside aspects, and that can be problematic. An upcoming study we're doing, we're going to look at perfectionism, which is related to conscientiousness. But there is adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive perfectionism. And so both, you know, the person is driven and trying to do their best, but one of them can be very maladaptive because it's related to stress and anxiety and depression because maybe they're not thinking of all components. And they can't stand being derailed. So I think part of that, it might not just be conscientiousness, but I think it can definitely play a role. Again, conscientiousness is a great thing. It's very rarely negative. But if things derail us, then it can be problematic.
Do you have a number, a percentage of people who exhibit conscientious traits? Is there such a thing as X percentage of people exhibit these traits?
No, because the way that most of the studies are done is it's based on the sample itself. So age actually makes a difference in conscientiousness. The older we get, the more conscientious we are. So your scores are going to go up with age. And so that's going to make a difference. You know, people at college should ideally be a little more conscientious. You know, it takes a little bit more of the responsibility, the follow through. Certain jobs have more conscientiousness in that job. So it's going to make a difference what your sample is. So I can't say on average. The other big problem that we have with research, big problem, is it's self-report for the most part. We do sometimes use, you know, spouse report, friend report. We've done stranger report, actually, on what they see in a person. But one of the big things is you're reporting on yourself. And so people, yeah, I'm organized. Yeah, I have control. Yeah, I'm responsible. And they're only seeing it through rose-colored glasses.
Yeah. We're going into the final break of this hour, Dr. Abernathy. And after the top of the hour news commercials, we'll be back and we'll be talking more with you about your pulsed electromagnetic frequency results, depression and sapphire, insomnia, the oils that you talked about, why you study conscientiousness, personalities, etc. I'm really looking forward to this. So we'll be right back, class, right after the top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Dr. Amber Abernathy, Ph.D. We're talking about conscientiousness. Dr. Abernathy, have you considered sharing this broadcast class with your university students?
Yes, that would be a great idea, especially I teach the class of personality. And I teach it every fall and spring semester. And so conscientiousness gets brought up a lot in there, and I touch on my research. So being able to just have them have an assignment on this or listen to this would be a good idea, because that way I don't have to repeat myself every day when I talk about the benefits of conscientiousness and how that plays a role.
Well, the reason I asked is because I've been on my best behavior. I really have. And those who are in class probably said, what's up with him? Okay. And here's something, and since we were talking about university students, maybe you can explain why this happened. So back in the university days, I would receive assignments, from my instructors. And for example, a big assignment, like a term paper, that kind of thing. And I would work really hard on it, and I would deliver it, on time. And the instructor would take it home, read all of the students' work, and then come back and with grades in red ink on the written on the first page of the assignment. And what would happen to me is the instructors would typically say, Vincent, please stay after class. I'd like to talk to you about this. And they'd say, you did a really good job, but that's not what I assigned. You didn't do it on the assignment. Do you have students who do that too?
Yes, a lot of times. I teach psychology of religion, and I think anytime you're teaching any class or any topic that is interesting to the student for one way or the other, then they students are so excited that they want to tell their thoughts, their beliefs on it. And a lot of times I'm like, I'm not asking for that. I'm not asking for that. You might have a very strong belief on that. I'm not asking for it. I wanted you to tell me what the research showed, which again is what psychology is all about. And so I often have to pull that back. My psychology of religion class, the very first assignment, I took it out of the textbook, but it basically says that we as psychologists are not debating right and wrong of any religion or any, we're simply looking at the research on it. And so I have to pull them back a lot of times, but I often think that's also a good student that's doing that because again, we talked about with that management skills, that motivation, and they're intrinsically motivated. They're excited. When they're going off on something, they're excited. And so it's really hard sometimes as a professor. I only grade with green ink because red can be so detrimental to someone's psyche. I only grade with green. But, it's really hard as a professor a lot of times to come back and say, but that's wrong. It's done by different professors and how we're looking at things. But I have that happen in every class, every semester. My psychology of adolescent class, they have to tell about themselves growing up, these certain concepts, puberty timing, all these different things, and sometimes it's so personal to them that I'm like, well, you didn't describe the topic at all. You just told me about one particular and so again, I think that's a good student, but not always what we're looking for when we're grading. So
one of our faculty members here at USA Prepares is named Bert Bertonis. And he'll be on tomorrow. He is the CEO of a corporation. He's a patent holder. He's an inventor. He's very, very brilliant in electrical engineering as well as other fields of his interest. And back in the university days, back in the 1970s, he was assigned as an electrical engineering student. He was assigned to build an amplifier, a simple amplifier. And instead, he built a digital FM tuner. Way more complicated. I mean, there were no digital FM tuners with a digital display back in the mid-70s. They had these tuners with a string and a pointer, and you turn the knob and it would move the string and it would move the pointer. That was how you could tell the frequency. He built one with a digital display. And this was the early days of LEDs. And so he did not get a good grade because he just was so desirous of building this FM tuner, and it still works to this day. So, and now he's been the CEO of many corporations. He's actually a consultant for some of the biggest telecommunications companies in the world. When they can't figure it out, they call him. Literally, I'm not kidding. So, have you found that people who don't take direction very well, aren't necessarily, bad students? They can actually be, quite inventive?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's kind of that little element of genius and the fact that they're taking it another step. And, I have to be really careful when I am grading to say, all right, maybe they didn't answer exactly what I was looking for, but I obviously know that they've got the concept because they went above and beyond. And that's kind of what that student did. It's like they obviously could build what I wanted them to build if they built the next step. So I think that, again, that's that element of openness and, that kind of, again, this concept almost of genius. We use that term a little bit too loosely, but the idea that they can think outside the box. And I think that that's really important. Most of my assignments I do are applied assignments. I want you not to just give me a definition. I want you to think outside the box. Pertain this to your life. Tell about it. And so, again, I think those are really great students. The biggest problem is, we're also, I have two kids. I have 16 and 18-year-old. And part of teaching, I see, is we're also preparing them for life. And we are living in a society where you, most of the time, need to follow the rules. And so another thing that I'm doing as a teacher is going, all right, but did you follow the rules? And, just as simply as if I tell you it needs to be 6 slides and you made it 8, then you didn't follow the rules. And so we're kind of teaching that along the way. And so that's that tricky gray area. Can be, I think this person will do wonderful in life, but maybe they're going to have a job where they're in charge more than following the rules.
There's a time outside of school when the rules are not necessarily in front of us. So in 1980, Bert Bertonis and I started this company. We manufactured satellite communications receivers. And we were pretty young at the time. And one day in March in 1980, we just had more time than we should have had. And what we did was we went into our conference room and we wrote a press release. We made up this fictitious thing that we said we invented. We spelled our names backwards and we sent it out. We said that you've seen this probably in, maybe the Twilight Zone, after we unveiled this with a press release. We said that we invented this thing that would let you control, a movie with your mind. You would have this, connection implanted in your body, and you just kind of sit back in a lazy boy and you can control, the movie, and you could be Rambo. You could be whoever you wanted, but you had to be stress tested, because if you wanted to be Rambo and you just weren't up for the task, you could die in your lazy boy chair watching the movie. And so we sent this out to Popular Science, the New York Times, Mechanics Illustrated, the Wall Street Journal. This darn thing got published. So we've been doing this, since 1980. We send this out. We modify it a little bit and we keep sending it out. And, 10 years after the fact, we got, there was a publication in Silicon Valley, California, that talked about great claims that failed to materialize. And one of them was ours. And so, that's a little bit of the outside the box thinking. And the reason I mention that is if you're going to share this with your class, they might find that amusing. But actually we did do it, and we've done it many, many times. And we talked about it on the air this year as well for April 1st. Oh, I forgot to say that we did it for April. We released it for immediate release on April 1, 1980, April Fool's Day. So we do it, most years, April 1st. Any comments about that?
Well, I always tell my students to be good consumers. It is great to, when they have to cite something, when they have to look something up, it's like, okay, where did you get that? Is it peer reviewed? What does it say about it? So my biggest thing there would be good consumers, because there's a lot of stuff out there. Look into it. Know what you're talking about. I have such a hard time publishing. We get a lot of revise and resubmit or straight out rejection. So I would like to know where you're sending stuff, because I think I'm doing it in the wrong direction. So.
Well, the reason that I mentioned this, and you're talking about being a good consumer, as a little a tangent to our class today, what happened was people read this darn thing. And they said, these guys have invented anti-gravity. We need to buy stock in their company. Now, we weren't a public company. We were a private corporation. And people were throwing money at us. And I was the chief financial officer at the time. And I was saying, Bert, we got to send this all back. Are you kidding? We're going to be in the Huskow. We can't sell something that is, an April Fool's prank. But it's actually true. I mean, all that happened. We sent it back, and we didn't take any of the money, but we were just a bunch of young guys having a little bit of fun with a little too much time on our hands. But so we've been doing it every year, and we make up addresses, and we cite, the Walter Reed Army Hospital. That's where we unveiled it, that kind of thing. And so if I can find a copy of the latest one, I'll email it to you. You mentioned the pulsed electromagnetic frequency device that you've been studying with Dr. Norm Shealy and researching. What have you found? I have one, and I've been using it, and I'll be glad to share my experiences, and I have on the air as well. What have you found, if you can share that?
Yeah, so we have done several different studies with it. Here's one that he just did recently that he's talked about several different times, and I was a participant in that. So, yeah, I can share my own personal stuff with it as well. But, he has found that, definitely depression, anxiety are going to decrease with it. That's one that I helped him kind of work on there with the depression and anxiety. And then he has found related to addiction that it changes that. My biggest thing personally, and this is one that I want to look at in the future, we've done some with insomnia and sleep before, is it actually helps with sleep. And dreaming, actually. Everybody that we've done a couple different studies with it. I actually had one participant tell me they could not use it because they dreamed too much. So that's something I want to look at in the future, actually, is dreaming and the sleep level. But the biggest ones, he's shown it related to decrease in, different things in the free radicals and that type of thing. But the biggest thing is kind of that depression, anxiety, stress, a decrease in that.
When I was a young child, I was in a chlorine fire, and I put out this fire with a garden hose, and I inhaled way, way too much chlorine gas. And I have some lung damage as a result, so I've been treated for this. And I've been using the pulsed electromagnetic frequency device on my chest I started with 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes, 45, an hour, in 2 hours. And I have had a couple CAT scans, and they can't believe that the scar tissue is getting smaller, and I don't think they've ever seen that before. So that's been my experience. And also, and I've mentioned this on the air before, I mentioned that for April Fools, Bert and I sent out this press release, and it indicated that we invented something that we did not invent. It was an absolute prank on the whole world. And so, relating that to what you just mentioned, Dr. Abernathy, this was, you could pick the character and be that character in the movie. And we kind of described this, that it would be vivid, and you'd believe it was real, that you were this character in the movie, like Rambo, etc. Well, when I didn't realize this until you just said it, that's exactly what's happening with me with dreaming. I have these wild dreams. Last night I was dreaming about trying to get a ride to help this person get there, wherever there was. I'm not sure where that was. And I don't even know if it was a he or she, but I was trying to get a ride, and whether it meant borrowing a car, jumping the fence for a compound and crashing through the gate. I'm not sure exactly what I had to do, but it was real. Is that the kind of dreams that you're talking about with the PEMF device with this one particular individual?
Yes, and it's not just that individual. I've had multiple people report this to me, including myself. So I sleep with it under my pillow, and I have found that very vivid, involved dreams, and I remember them more. And so it's changing these different brain waves, and that's what it's supposed to do. And I think it's getting us into this more, what I would call it almost a more creative state. And so, that a couple things to look at in the future. Again, the study that I did with Norm was looking at changing depression and anxiety, which is a big one for college students and everyone, but looking at it with college students. But I've done an insomnia study with him before, looking at frequency of lights and vibration, and so still frequency, just different types of frequency, that would help people sleep more. But I think that kind of a future direction for this, the PEMF device, is to look at sleeping. And not only that, but if it is allowing for kind of an open in creativity, would that help people that are already more creative, during their daily lives? So talking about, sounds like you are one of them, but those people that think outside the box, and does that make it even more where they would? But yeah, I have it again under my pillow, And last night, mine was not as pleasant, but someone was attacking me, and I actually apparently stirred my dog, who barked, which then woke me up, but also ran off the person in my dream, so it worked well.
Well, the dreams that I have are things that I've never even thought about. I mean, it's not like there's this deep-rooted problem that I have, and I keep it in the back of my mind, and I can't get rid of it. The dreams that I have are about things I've never even considered, and they're just weird things. And when you talk about creativity, I had this problem. We built an off-grid / on-grid / hybrid solar array, and we run our farm on this thing. And we were generating too much current, and something had changed with the solar arrays. It literally has. And I was reporting this to our class, and I couldn't figure out exactly, since we didn't have a consultant built this, we, cut and welded and, built the solar array and wired it and all that ourselves without any consulting. And so, I didn't have anybody to turn to figure this problem out. But I came up with the solution in my sleep as to exactly how to fix this problem, and I did. So I think there is an element to enhancing creativity with the pulsed electromagnetic frequency device, or PEMF. I really believe there's something to it. And it's not just imagination. It's real. Any comments about that?
I think it's definitely possible, because by changing those brain waves and kind of opening up that other, they say that we don't use about 90% of our brain. So opening kind of these different brain waves up and allowing for, especially during our sleep, that's one time where we can shut off other things and kind of allow our brain to go on its own. So I think, that's what, when I use a lot of Dr. Sheely's products, or when I talk to people that have, again, this study that we were doing, multiple people, I started asking them, because I was using it, does it affect your dreams? Yes, yes, yes. And again, with the one person, it was too much, became almost overwhelming to her. And so I think it's definitely a future direction for something like that, for sleep / creativity.
When we come back after the bottom of the hour news and commercial announcements, can we talk about bliss, the oils, especially the bliss oil, actually air bliss. And I'll share a story with you what happened when I first experienced it, and why Dr. Sheely invited me to try it. And can you share, your thoughts on this? We'll be right back. Dr. Amber Abernathy is with us, and she is studying conscientiousness and teaching psychology at Missouri State University. And regarding the essential oils that Dr. Sheely has formulated, many years ago, about 10 years ago, I wanted to teach my family, my outlaws, if you will, about preparedness. And they weren't interested. So I thought, okay, they won't listen to Vinny. Maybe they'll listen to other people who say the same kinds of things. So I decided to have an expo. And I thought, well, if we're going to do one, we'll just do a large one. And we had one at the J.Q. Hammond Center. We had them at the the Convention Center in Springfield. What is that called? A great big one. Ozark Empire Fairgrounds.
Yeah.
I had some there. Yeah. And we had them in Lebanon. We had about 7 of them. And so in the early days, I needed to find out about advertising. How do you promote this darn thing? So I went to some radio stations, and I explained to the station manager what this expo was about. And he said, you need to have a radio show. And what works for you, Wednesday or Friday? And I was stunned. And bear in mind that when I was in elementary school, I avoided all speaking in class. Okay? All the plays and all those kinds of things. In high school, I avoided public speaking. And at the university level, I avoided public speaking class. I don't know how I did it, but I avoided every single one of them. And I was terrified to speak in public. And now, in order to promote this expo, I had to do something. And I was offered a radio show. So I did that. And then the big station in town decided that they wanted this broadcast. So I ended up on the big station. And that's where I met Dr. Sheely. And so he was on I think it was Thursdays, he was on the hour before I was on. And so I met him because he'd be getting out of the studio seat, I'd be getting in, and we'd, meet in passing, if you will. Well, early on, he decided that he thought I needed some bliss. And that was the first bliss that he came up with. And it was because he could hear my knees knocking through the walls of the studio when I was on the air. And so he just handed me this vial of bliss. And I said, well, it's great, Dr. Shuley, thank you. What is it? And he told me what it was. And he said, here's the map. Here's where you put it on. So I went into the men's room. I took off my shirt and I put it in the spots that were on the map. I went back in the studio, went on the air, and then it took effect. And I walked out of the studio live on the air. It was like I didn't care about anything. Absolute true story. The engineer had to come and get me. Vinny, get back here. What are you doing? And this is live radio, no safety net. Absolutely true story. I was wondering if he told you that story.
No, he hasn't. No, I mean, I get to hear a lot about the different things that it's done for people, but that's great. That is definitely a decrease in anxiety right there.
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, I was terrified, to speak in public, and going on the radio was a really big deal in the studio with all the pressures and so forth. And so after that, no big deal. And I didn't need that foam rubber between my knees to keep the sound from traveling through the walls and the microphone going out over the airwaves. But I was terrified. So that's what it did for me. What has your research shown you with Dr. Shuley's essential oils?
So I did a research project with him on Life Bliss, which is actually, he didn't sell it. And it actually was supposed to kind of combine all of the different oils together into one. We had some great results on oxytocin, which is one of the things that Air Bliss does. But the problem is it didn't do as well as just using all of his essential oils that he already sells. So he decided not to do that instead. Air Bliss, though, is one personally, because I think it's one that he gives to a lot of people. It's one he personally gave to me one of the first go-rounds. My son was diagnosed at a young age with Asperger's, which they don't call it that anymore, but high-functioning autism, very high-functioning autism. And that is one of the things that he recommends for that as well. Depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism, he recommends that. So my son, the last point, I think, is up on the very top of the head. And my son said, like, when he got to that point and would put it on, he said he just kind of felt clearer, I guess, was kind of his wording. And maybe that's a little bit more relaxed, a little less anxiety, just reaching that top point. And so he liked it for that reason. I love Air Bliss because it does help with that oxytocin. We've done quite a few studies. I have a few more that we're doing looking at kind of this lack of oxytocin that people have. Oxytocin makes you feel good, but it's a bonding agent. And so, when you hug somebody, when you hold hands, all of that, seeing your child's face, it gives you this oxytocin boost. The problem is now people are, with staying at home, with Zoom meetings, with things that you can't hug, you can't shake hands, we're missing a lot of that oxytocin boost. And so you can get that from using the Air Bliss on the certain points, acupuncture points. And so you can kind of still have that connection, that happiness that you need that we're not getting otherwise. So it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. And can you taste Air Bliss in your mouth, let's say 30, 45, 60 seconds after you apply it? Can you taste it? I can.
I can, and my son mentioned he can, but I'm not sure everyone is like that. But yeah, I have.
Okay.
He has
I was just wondering. Go ahead.
He has a new pain oil that he does not have on the market, and it is my favorite thing he has ever developed in his life. I won't say that, but I fell down some stairs and I'm pretty sure broke my tailbone. And I was in the clinic and they were like, you have to try this. And it is an oil, and it is the best thing I have ever used, and it makes the pain go away. fairly quickly, and it's for anti-inflammatory, so it actually helps heal. So between that and setting on the PEMF device, I did a lot of healing.
Well, that's wonderful. What does he call this particular pain oil?
He did not have a name for it. He has been, I guess, just kind of doing small samples for people. But I am amazed by it. So I'm hoping he gets it out there soon because my bottle's running short and I'm going to need more.
Yeah, I know someone who would be a great example if he's going to continue, or you and he are going to continue studying this. Someone who's been in pain most of his life and can't seem to find an answer. And so, that could be a great small sample study. Conscientiousness. And why do we study conscientiousness?
One of the main reasons is it's because it's so important for our society, as I was talking about earlier. We push this in society. We reward people that follow through and that are responsible, that show up, that do what they're supposed to do. It's rewarding. And so, that's part of the reason. It's also, you were talking at the very beginning about, mate selection and why are we not finding these mates and what do we look for? And it's actually one of the main personality traits related to happiness in marriage or marriage stability. Doesn't necessarily even have to be happiness, but that you stay married. They did a 30-year married couple study, and having that personality trait made for more stable, long-lasting marriages. It's one of the top personality traits we look for in a spouse, so that people call it dependable. But same thing, responsible, dependable, conscientiousness. So it's what we look for there. It is related to marriage, life satisfaction, health, jobs, less depression, less anxiety, self-regulation, academic motivation. Just mortality, blood pressure, lack of using of, marijuana, heroin, all that type of things. So it's related to almost everything. It's pushed in our society, so it's so important to have it. And so why I study it is how can we increase it? Because unfortunately, we don't have exact statistics, because I talked about earlier, it's hard to say how many people actually have it. But unfortunately, we believe that the level of conscientiousness is going down, not up.
Yeah, I can't say how it happened with me, other than the fact that my wife picked me, and and I'm so glad she did. I was working at an auto parts store behind the counter, and I met her in 4th grade, and we went to school together, but I stayed back because I couldn't read. I was dyslexic, and they thought, this guy's never going to make it through elementary school, and they thought I'd never make it through high school, and they thought I'd never get to college. And so we were in 4th grade together, and then she zoomed on ahead, and we went to different high schools, and then I met her again one summer semester working at the auto parts store during the college years. And we dated, and we got married. We've been married for over 41 years. And I think, and I don't know how to describe this, but I think it's really important to visualize how your prospective mate can grow as you would grow if you envision yourself growing. And how would that work? And socioeconomic values, do you value money the same way? Do you value lots of things the same way? And I think that opposites, while they may attract in magnetism, I don't think it's a great thing for, relationships in terms of marriage. Your thoughts on that?
That is backed up by the research 100%. Similarities attract, opposites do not tend to attract, and if they do not tend to stay together. Even things like morning or evening, or your morning or evening person, can cause conflict in marriages. So the more alike you are, it tends to be better in marriages. If you think about a person that is conscientious, that likes order and likes self-control and likes responsibility, and then the mate doesn't or isn't that way, that's just going to create conflict again and again. I also caution people on the whole opposites attract. The research shows that the more you're around somebody similar to yourself, the more it strengthens it for both of you. So conscientiousness is a great one to have. Again, there's very little negative associated with it. You should be high and conscientious. So if you've got a conscientious spouse, you're going to become more and more conscientious. The problem is when you do opposites. So you marry somebody that's not conscientious at all. Well, what happens is you somewhat meet in the middle. They actually increase just a little bit, but you decrease in conscientiousness. So, we have to be really careful. We want those similar to ourselves and those with the good values, the things that are important and going to give us somewhere in life. So always similar, and especially similar in those important personality traits.
Mrs. Finelli knows with 100% certainty that I am not going to come home with a new Corvette and say, guess what I just bought you? She knows that that's never going to happen. She also knows that I wouldn't buy a gallon of paint for our house without consulting her. Not that I need her permission, but it's half her money. And if we're going to paint the wall and she has to look at it, she has a right to be involved in the decision. And she feels the same way. I'd love to hear your comments when we come back. We are in the final segment of this 2-hour broadcast class. And Dr. Amber Abernathy is with us. And she is the chair of a department at the Missouri State University. It's called the Mary Charlotte Bayless Sheely Chair in Conscientious Psychology. She's an associate professor of psychology at Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri. I have 3 questions remaining to ask you, Dr. Abernathy. One is, do you have a reaction to me not buying a gallon of paint for our house without Mrs. Finelli's involvement, discussion, approval, etc. in that color? And what I mean is, if I happen to like a color and she doesn't like it, well, we're not going to do it. If she likes a color and I don't like it, we're not going to do it. We have to agree on the color. Now, it may be, $20, $30, $40, $50 purchase. Some may say that's insignificant, but I think it's a respect issue, and I believe it's half her money anyway, because we both worked all our lives and we're farmers, and that's how we earn a living. And it's only right. You have any thoughts on that?
I wish more people thought like that. Marriage is not 50-50, it's 100-100. But, basically what you're saying is that both of you should be respected, your opinions heard. And if you truly want happiness in a relationship, what people are looking for is they're looking for respect, to be heard, to be listened to. And so, it's not even about the money. It's about listening to her and taking into consideration her thoughts and feelings. And I think that that's missing a lot. Dr. Sheely talks a lot today about the decline in marriages. If we had a whole nother couple of hours, I could go into the fact that, we're pushing self-esteem on people, but they're only thinking about themselves. And we've got a very narcissistic society. So if you want a happy relationship, you got to think about others.
Well, we do have a couple more hours. Actually, we have way more than that, and we can do it, in future broadcast class. So if you find the time and Thursday works for you, then we can go on again and again. It can be 1 hour or 2 hours. So just let me know what your thoughts are. I had another question. Since you might be recommending this for your students may ask you, all right, so what, you give us grades in our work. What grade did you give him? And would you mind sending me a grade for this class? Please don't say it on the air. But I've gotten plenty of F grades in my life, and my greatest achievement was F minus, and no one's ever gotten one of those at the university before. But I've been able to do that. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate that. And I have one other question for you. Have you noticed during the commercials that the commercials on USA Prepares, meaning that they're not our commercials, but they are the network commercials? I've given all our commercial time back to the network so we'd have more talk time, more teaching time, if you will. Have you noticed that the commercials are completely different from typical radio that one might hear in his or her car? And what I mean by that is they're commercials for health, There are commercials for how you can convert your pistol into a carbine rifle. I mean, things like that. Have you noticed a tremendous difference or not?
Oh, I absolutely. The first the first commercial set, I thought, oh, I'm paying attention to the commercials this time because it's not selling me some over-the-counter medication. It's not doing any of that. Yeah, it was very different commercials. Very different.
Okay. And I think a lot of effort goes into making the commercial advertisements interesting and unusual. What is involved in the creation? What creates a conscientious person? Is it heredity? Is it by getting so many bruises that a person says, I think I learned from that, from the last 3 times I cut myself, I'm not going to do that anymore? Or do we have an idea of what creates it?
Well, conscientiousness has approximately, and you can only say approximately on this, a 40% genetic or heritability rate. So there's definitely an underlying there. But that leaves about 60% where environment plays a role. So a study that I'm writing up, big stack on my desk right now, actually is going to show the role that fathers play. There's a huge role that fathers play in child's conscientiousness. So parenting makes a difference. A whole new direction my research is leading is resiliency, which is related to conscientiousness. And that is where bumps and bruises, and not just huge traumas, but even sports, taking part in sports can lead to that. So some of it's learned. We published a paper on 2 different ways to increase conscientiousness, and a lot of it was simply goal setting and teaching someone to self-monitor into goal sets. So I think there's genetics, and then I think there's environment, and I think it's a combination of both, but I definitely think we can work on it.
It's really interesting that the entire faculty of USA Prepares is a group of individuals who are independent thinkers. They don't take direction very well at all. I mean, I'm serious. That's why I say you're the only one that can hold down a job. And your job is quite unusual, so because you're involved with Dr. Shealy. But if you were to study a group of conscientious people, the faculty of USA Prepares would be like an interesting group to look at. Dr. Abernathy, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to future broadcasts with you.